Yes, I am aware this is another video about Spider-Man, I'm really sorry. A while back I saw the new Spider-Man movie and my reaction was... And I said, well, that was terrible, I should probably make a video talking about why, but I don't really need to. Everyone saw the problem here.
It was as subtle as an earthquake.
I would have been adding to the pile of well-articulated arguments deconstructing the film already. And at first I was like, well, that's great, you know, I can actually relax and buy a fucking boat or something. But instead it got me thinking about how this happened. It appears to be the symptom of a far bigger problem. A symptom that's already being touted as a failure after 5 films, including a reboot. Which, at a $500 million gross, is nothing short of insane. No, there's more to this than the new Spider-Man movie just being terrible. This has been a long time coming. I'm not going to do a review per se, but I am going to try and look at how the point appears to have been consistently missed. I know I've checked my nerdery at the door for this series a long time ago, and this could sound like an entitled rant, but ultimately my concern is in discussing what could make for the most interesting film based on the material available. With that said, let's vlog this mare. Lights, cameras, boring. Sony's The Amazing Spider-Man 2 Rise of the Silver Spoon feels pretty standard. Action scene, funny scene, sad scene, future movie plug scene. Hi there, that's Felicia. She's gonna be important later. You start to feel the beats instead of the film having any kind of natural, unpredictable rhythm. But hey, don't blame Spidey for this one completely. This is a problem most superhero movies have. Their utter linearity. I'm not just talking about the use of the mythic structure. It's a much more fundamental problem concerning the way they use film as a medium. While I'm not suggesting they'll ever break cinematic boundaries, nor that they have any obligation to, it's possible to take an old story and use the medium to renew its value. Of course, the material given helps lift that linearity further, which is why I feel Marvel Studios is ahead of the curve. Marvel has always been more of a heavyweight than DC in its storytelling origins. DC's heroes were mostly ideals we could aspire to be, but Marvel's characters were interpretations of who we already were. You might have wanted to be Superman when you've only ever really been Shadowcat or Luke Cage or Speedball or Rocket Red. Okay, maybe not that guy. This means that the thematic depth people want to associate with these movies was already ingrained. And while this is the case with the Spider-Man comics, which launched its popularity, it was never really the case with the films. There was never any renewed understanding of why this franchise stood out at all. And why is that? Well, I'm no expert and I don't do drugs, but I think I can't say that with a straight face. But I think this situation has less to do with Spider-Man and more to do with Batman. That's right, more fucking history. You have to understand that before the idea of superhero movies in general was cool, Spider-Man and Batman were the poster boys for their respective franchises. They represented the arms race of popularity. Never underestimate what Adam West & Co. did for the brand, cementing the characters into popular culture by bringing it to a new audience. Never mind that later interpretations were actually closer to the original depiction. The public was surprised when Batman was taken more seriously because that wasn't the general perception at the time.
And they said it's not a picture for children. Which is, you know, Batman was such a popular thing with the kids.
I think it's the evil version of Batman, and our version was the wicked version, and there's many layers difference in that. You have more fun being wicked than evil.
Spider-Man as a comic has become exceedingly popular, to the point where it was the most marketed franchise of Marvel's, and I think this is the reason a lot of people were very accepting when the Raimi movie came into being. It was less about getting Spider-Man right, and more about getting Spider-Man on the big screen ASAP. And to put this into perspective, X-Men had much more to prove by comparison, and still only made a modest profit. Spider-Man movies come across as a product designed to show how popular the character already was, not to re-establish any of the inherent values that made him popular to begin with. It's not even subtle when they do it. You can see it here, there, it's fucking everywhere. But as you may well understand, this is a very short-sighted goal, because a quality film will always last longer. That's why Iron Man went from being a second stringer in the Marvel Universe to one of the most financially successful movie franchises of the past decade. Iron Man really did have something to prove, and showed people that we should expect better. So can it be helped? Well, Spider-Man is seen as the people's hero, and that's something that can certainly be flirted with cinematically. The first movie sort of tries this with a couple of documentary-styled shots detailing the way New York feels about the webhead, and I'd like to see this kind of neurotic take tried more often. If you go looking for it, some people are actually making it happen.
Really hoping this documentary would shed some light into everything going on, the whole controversy crap. You know, I want my side to be heard, the real truth.
You have the advantage of a hero who not only doubts himself constantly, but whose language is that of the people around him, the people who could be you. You could also make the city a character, as many other films have tried. This suggests something more akin to, say, Woody Allen's work, and fuck, if that's good enough for the terrible Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon, it's certainly good enough for the films.
How's he doing all this?
Why can't I give my opinion? This is a free country.
He can give you. You have to give it so loud. I mean, aren't you ashamed to pontificate like that?
What do I do with this? Spider-Man worked really well as a serial because the conflict was ongoing. Most heroes were dealing with the villain of the week or just some new kind of kryptonite, but Spidey had it rough from the start. The public didn't trust him, his social awkwardness was impacted by his inability to keep appointments, and his loved ones became vulnerable. Cap doesn't have to worry about someone killing the people he loves on a regular basis. Most of his friends are dead. or ninjas, and the movies never quite capture that conflict. Moreover, the studio seems to have mistaken the actual public that adores Spider-Man to the fictional public that populates his movies. Battles are fought for him, rallies are held for him, boss battle arenas are built for him in the street. Guys, I know it's cool to warm up a crowd, but this isn't Disneyland. If a giant rhino robot shows up to kill Spider-Man, the natural instinct is probably to run the fuck away. Oh, look at that. Look, he let the kid have a little moment. That's really ineffective. The audience is not going to appreciate the characters more if you project their actual feelings into crowd scenes. If anything, you'll gain more adoration for the character from the audience if you show him as a victim of mistrust and slander. If the in-universe audience loves him, then why the hell would the Bugle hold any kind of credibility? In fact, this reduction of conflict has been a running issue throughout the series. Sure, Peter's been given obstacles to deal with, but it never feels like the characters are ever developing beyond the surface. The first reboot could have been about fatherhood, but the tragedies feel unconnected and nothing is learned from them, which makes the close proximity of the body count feel like overkill. Peter's one real friend who is not only his girlfriend, but also knows his identity, thus dissolving two potential moments of tension. Harry Osborn and Peter's parents are both written to be so far removed from his active social life that when they die or turn bad or show up, it's very difficult to feel anything but indifference. When you watch these films, do you really feel that the characters are thematically and contextually intertwined, or are they there just because, well, they were in the comics? These films can be so much more than that, and that doesn't mean they have to be very complex or highbrow. Winter Soldier manages to combine dozens of characters and plot threads from the source material to help craft a story about loyalty, both good and bad. It doesn't try to be groundbreaking, but there's clearly a lot of effort put in to make it more than just a typical blockbuster. Who do I trust? I don't know who I trust. Do I trust you? How can I be a patriot if I don't trust anyone? Well, it doesn't really matter. Who do I trust? Oh my god, who do I trust? Heroes and villains. But mostly villains. All of the bad guys in these movies are portrayed as hilariously fruity. Can't think why. There would be no sadness if we were super gay. Just unicorns and magic if we were super gay. Seriously though, this kind of leads in from my last point. It's not totally bad. Yes, Dubstep Unchained is even more goofy than that 70s Venom, but I felt they managed to get away with that for the first half of the film. Electro never really had much of a personality in the comics after all. However, the shitty dialogue can't hide for long, as before you know it, the guy goes full tilt action figure like the rest of his predecessors. McDonald's probably cheered when that showed up on screen. Electro suffers for the same reason Spidey's other enemies suffer in this rebooted series, which borrows from an equally terrible idea in the comics. I get the insistence on this animal theme. It's a superficial way of suggesting that visual connectivity equals depth, but it's a flawed concept, and they played the most tenuous card with those fucking eels. Is Mysterio going to fall into a radioactive fishbowl? Is Kraven the Hunter going to merge with Cinemax? What the fuck is Shocker even? DFS? Fucking... The best way to look at how this can be done right is to look at a rogues gallery that's just as popular as its hero. Batman. Again. Now, there's no relation between clowns and bats, nor penguins nor cats, but thematically, Batman's villains are all perfectly married to him. They represent his own personal flaws, and each time he overcomes them, he's also overcoming his own psyche and developing naturally as a character. Think about it. The Joker represents Bruce Wayne's submission to chaos. Two-Face represents his doubts about justice. The Scarecrow represents Batman's personal fears, and so on. Now, I'm not saying that these have always been there, but over time, people have almost accidentally discovered these connections and managed to build upon them successfully. And you know the villain they've never applied this to? Spidey's archenemy, the Green Goblin. Nobody can wrap their minds around how to tackle him. They resort to tech, they resort to chemicals, they resort to mutations, but none of it ever comes close to making him feel intrinsically connected to Spider-Man, and also they make the Hulk feel redundant. It should be remembered that the Goblin's identity was hotly contested at the time. Stanley and Ditko argued about who the Goblin should be, on whether or not he should be an existing character like Norman to add drama to the story. Any villainous identity could have been chosen for Norman and it would have had the same dramatic effect.
Should the Green Goblin be a man in the street, or should he be somebody that we know?
I've heard the Green Goblin story too, that he didn't want the Green Goblin to be Norman because he felt it was, you know, what are the chances that your arch nemesis is your best friend's father?
Obviously, Stan was right.
The next logical step was having someone close to Spidey discovering his secret identity, and the fact that person turned out to be Norman as well was more about narrative convenience than giving into the power of... What was it? I don't fucking know, it was in a comic or something. By no means is anything I'm asking a lofty standard. They already half-managed this with Dr. Octopus in both the comics and the movies. Octavius is essentially an older version of Parker, and in this scene we can instantly see their connection in how they view responsibility. Yes, I know this might sound horribly simplistic, but thematic links such as responsibility are all you need to start building dynamic connections between characters. Otto was never told that his brilliance was ever in any doubt, which, when he became Doc Ock, heightened his sense of ego and righteous indignation. Peter's becoming Spider-Man threw him into constant doubt after the murder of his uncle, and you can see how these two traits balance each other out. This sense of responsibility applies perfectly to Norman Osborn. Spider-Man is a man for a reason. It's about a kid who grows up and accepts that he needs to take responsibility. Norman is a man who has everything, and who shoulders many responsibilities. But when everything falls apart, instead of accepting that it's his fault, Norman sticks his fingers in his ears and dresses up like a little kid in a Halloween costume. Norman represents what would happen if Peter absolutely abdicated responsibility, and expects other people to fix his mistakes. His revenge is vindictive, childish, and perfectly reflects his choice to dress up like an imp. I hope that sounds less contrived than I hate you, Spider-Man, look at my filthy teeth. No, honestly, that was all I could focus on. Fuck! The romance in the Spider-Man movies is terrible. Just gonna come out and say it. Fuck's sake. Neither of these two interpretations have either been interesting or believable. The original trilogy spends way too much time being horribly underwritten and hammy, while the reboots actually suffer from trying way too hard in that faux pas acting style that adolescents cry over. They do idiotic shit or carry out creepy behaviour and are rewarded with forgiveness because I guess they're on the poster or something, I don't know. Now in the comics, Peter was actually quite arrogant. He felt entitled after being bullied and marginalised for so long. Being Spider-Man gave him a sense of power that he could use against his friends, and it was rightly treated as a flaw.
He also isn't like Spider-Man, who will bully you and make fun of his villains. Why do you think Spider-Man's villains all hate him so much? Maybe because as he breaks their bones, he's mocking them.
Superior Spider-Man actually mirrors this quite well when, oh holy shit, I'm defending Superior, we've reached the fucking endpoint. Oddly enough, only Spider-Man 3 of all fucking things has actually shown any kind of competence in showing Peter as a character in need of some growth outside of the well-trodden origin story. There's a great scene where Peter's ego reaches its peak. He's become completely self-assured. Mary Jane has finally had enough when he has the gall to accept Gwen Stacy's flirtatious sweater advances. You get the sense that Peter's really fucked up and that he needs to reach beyond this kind of behaviour. And also, this is supposed to be Mysterio. Fucking sold. Which very neatly brings us to Hipster Man and Gerbil Face. These two are really capable actors, and I like them both. It's great that they hooked up in real life, but whoever forgot to discipline them on not letting them get too complacent in their roles is a fucking idiot. The biggest issue I have with this romance in the last two movies is that I'm not watching Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy hook up. I'm watching Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield being themselves. And it's really boring. It's not that I oppose of films revolving around relationships either. There are many films out there that offer incredibly naturalistic relationships that are seriously engaging, between actors who aren't in love and are, you know, acting.
But that doesn't mean one has to go through all the...
You mean?
Exactly.
I thought you said you were decent.
I am decent. I also happen to be naked.
Charlie Chaplin had babies when he was 73.
Yeah, but he was too old to pick them up.
Natural screen chemistry has to be maintained, and while in the first movie it felt more sincere, in the second it felt like they were laughing between takes at how fake this all was. Other actors who have lived together for many years know that they have to put in the work to make it seem effortless to the audience, so well executed that, unlike the blatant Spider-Man quirkiness, you may not have even noticed. But your brain did. I'm really sorry that keeps happening. Even so, I said when the first film came out it was a massive mistake to have Peter reveal his identity to Gwen so early on in the franchise. Part of the heartbreak of her death in the comics was that she actually never found out, but it also takes away the tension that actually made the romance interesting to begin with. People who are already in comfortable, loving relationships is not that interesting. Why do you think so many classics ended with happily ever afters?
What? What?
No, it's kissing again. You don't want to hear that.
There's much more interesting material to use here, guys. In the comics, Pete hung around not just with Gwen, but with a whole group of groovy teens and hit bars and that kind of shit, daddy-o. Should I feel bad for saying that? With more people involved, the dynamics of the romance became more interesting, with a myriad of options for a writer to choose from to direct the drama. The fact that Gwen and Pete are so into each other is kind of sickening, to the point where everyone else is just fodder to be ignored. As a result, when Gwen died, I felt nothing but relief, especially since in this version it was entirely her fault, thereby absolving Mr. Perfect again. I was tired of these two being so lovesick, and I was really glad that it all came crashing down. Bite me. So that's my take on things as they stand, and I know what you might be thinking. What an elitist snob, you know? Such a close-minded reviewer. Fuck this guy and his standards.
It's his career, that's the joke. Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Seriously, what would a good Spider-Man adaptation look like anyway? Bingo. Spectacular Spider-Man is the closest I've seen to a solid adaptation, period. This show strives to take everything that audiences loved about the various versions of the franchise and manage to streamline them into one cohesive whole. The characters are well written, the drama is exciting, and it actually manages to be completely unpredictable with aspects of the franchise even fans might be familiar with. It's a show that strives to make a quality series above all else. If you haven't seen it, I implore you to give it a watch. You might just be surprised. In conclusion, I hope this video has helped offer some discussion to those of you still trying to figure this whole mess out, but, you know, at the end of the day, I think maybe a Spider-Man movie just isn't called for. I mean, the public feels that the franchise has become rather saturated, and I don't blame them. They've spoken through their wallets and given these guys the chance to rethink their strategy. Perhaps this will encourage them not to rush themselves, to explore ways to creatively engage their audience with this long-endured and beloved franchise without losing any financial backing. Perhaps this is a lesson that there is in fact a connection between quality and success in such situations. Maybe we need to learn to call our boots and reflect on what we can learn. Or not. Fuck it.
And if none of that works, they'll just reboot me again. And again. And again, Spider-Man? Marvel will be making billions off of She-Hulk, Damage Control, Wonder Man, and Werewolf by Night movies, and I'll be getting bit by that freaking spider for the 7th time! And there's gotta be some what-if alternate history versions of the story, and we can't deprive the people of that. At this point, we won't run out of stories to tell until 2099, at which point, they can just make a movie of Spider-Man 2099! Doesn't that all sound great?! Well, the alternate history actually does sound kind of cool.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, does whatever a spider can. Spins a web any size, catches thieves just like flies. Look out, here comes the Spider-Man.
So yeah, I recorded that from a duvet, so fucking boiling right now. It's also summer, so fuck it. Subscribe, like, comment. I'm sure you need me to tell you to do all those things, but more importantly, I have a Twitter, and I'd really appreciate if you followed it, so you can ask me if you want to see me do a Google Hangout and stuff like that, and yeah, let's get together and sing from banjo. I can't play anything, I don't know why I'm offering that. I've forgotten how to end videos. Ah, shit. Oh well.
I'd rather have a banana.